Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me here. And I hope you have a great experience. This is my first time on stage. And I'm a little nervous, quite excited, but I'm going to try to give you the best experience. So I think today's presentation is following Lazarus attacks exploiting the open source ecosystem. Well, this sounds big, but it has a lot to it. So just a few words about who am I. I am Mohammed Talat. I'm a ransomware researcher, recovery engineer. So this is what I do full time. But I'm also an independent threat researcher, tracking ABT groups, crimeware, and everything's malware. So, everything has a story, and there's always a motivation. So my motivation here is Lazarus is probably one of the most notorious ABT groups the world has ever seen. Every day, probably every few months, you hear of an incident, a crypto heist, maybe financial institution attack, maybe espionage. So a lot of major incidents. And so its activities are really expanding, including many countries. Usually when we talk about Lazarus, we're saying everything's on the table. And so there's no limitations to what they can do. Mostly here, we're going to be talking about software supply chain compromise attacks. And we'll explain what this is in a minute. And definitely, we need to understand those guys to be able to defend and build better strategies. So what is the goal? Well, I'm going to try to provide a comparative approach to some of the Lazarus attacks that were obviously disclosed a while ago. So you shouldn't expect something fresh, something novel that was never seen before. But I'm going to try to approach it from a different angle, different perspective, and share my insights on each of these attacks. So, topics of today. Who is Lazarus? Okay, Lazarus, like I said before, it's a highly active ABT group. Everything's on the table, and you can probably see from these screenshots, very major public instance that happened like, August 2023, September 2022, I guess, so not far away. So every once in a while, you hear of a major incident attributed to the Lazarus group. Okay, Lazarus. Lazarus is probably a bit of a misnomer. It's not a single ABT group. It's many subgroups operating under the RGB, General, Reconnaissance General Bureau. It's like the FSB here in Russia. I'm sure you understand. So there's so many subdivisions, Punarov, Andrew, Moonstone Sleet, and many others. Well, probably names doesn't matter, but what you need to understand is each one of these subgroups have its own objective and its own targets. Punarov is a child of Lazarus, and definitely it focuses on attacking financial institutions. And so those are the money mules guys. So they're looking for money, attacking banks. You've probably heard of the Bangladesh attack, crypto firms, financial institution attacks. This is all probably Punarov. Okay, so the first, I'm sure you know what Kaspersky is, all right? So the first report that probably disclosed Punarov was one that's titled Lazarus Under the Hood by Kaspersky. Really great research, I'd recommend it. The next subgroup is Andrew, and this one focuses mostly on South Korea. And so South Korea and North Korea are just neighbors, and so there's definitely things in common. They have some, some argues in between. And Moonstone Sleet, which is our today's, focus, definitely. This is also believed to be a child of Lazarus. There's no, confirmation, I would say, but this is at least what Microsoft confirmed. They have so many objectives, financial gain, espionage, disruption, ransomware attacks, and many more. Okay, infection vectors. Like I said, everything is on the table. Lazarus, they are very versatile. So they, lure malicious documents, lure HWB files, weaponized open source software, malicious packages. So they can approach you multiple different ways. They can send you a malicious lure document, whether it being Excel, Microsoft Word, PDF, whatever. Also for the South Koreans, they're using HWB, Hangul Word Processor. It's like, Microsoft Word, but for South Korea. Weaponized open source software are today's focus, and malicious packages definitely. Okay, malware and attack cases. So we're going to be talking about mainly 3 attack cases, I promise. Okay. So the first one is Trojanized putty by Lazarus. This incident apparently happened September 29, 2022, reported by Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Center. And they just, sharing details about detecting a wide range of social engineering campaigns using weaponized, legitimate open source software. Okay, this sounds a lot of talk anyway. So company employees, yeah, so this is the target. They're usually going after, security researchers, IT guys, people who have, something to hide, probably. So they will, contact the victim over, LinkedIn, Twitter, other social media apps, and send you that malicious ISO document that contains, the malicious software as well as a README file. I think it's not working. So we can see probably here from the screenshot that the initial attack vector was just a weaponized Buddy installer. I'm sure everyone works in the ID industry knows what Buddy is. It's just an open source terminal emulator program. You can use it for remote management and remote connection and things like that. So they have weaponized or trojanized an installer, and as you can probably see here, they're checking for 173, 184, 15, 189. I'll talk about what this is. This is just an IP address check, okay? And you can see from the screenshot, they first create this package color directory, they copy something over, and definitely this is the encrypted, this one here, this XMM word is definitely the encrypted buffer. We'll talk about this as we go through. Okay, shellcode to payload. So the initial stage is definitely the Trojanized installer, but that one is just, kicking off the infection chain, which we'll emphasize later on. But definitely the thing this is better. Okay. So the legitimate installer, when this is executed, it just copies over this color cbl.exe to this newly created directory under program data, and they pass in this special, hex string, which apparently is just a password that will be used later to decrypt next stages. But definitely, really what happens is it copies this executable, it drops a DLL, which is colorui.dll, which is a malicious DLL, definitely. That will be later on side-loaded. They're exporting this default search order hijacking technique, the way Microsoft searches for DLLs for software that imports from external libraries. And that one actually is going to execute in memory Devi shell, which is just an open source loader in the form of shell code. That one was control flow flattened, definitely. Control flow flattening, just some compiler level obfuscation technique, meant to hide the the nitty-gritty details of what's going on. Okay. And that one is just executing in memory the final stage, which is a full-featured backdoor. In our case, it was Zeta Nile. I'm sure, probably Zeta Nile was well documented by the CISA and the JP cert. It's just a full-featured backdoor, can do all kinds of things you can think of. And it was, in my case, VM Protect. PAG, definitely. Okay. The next attack case we have here is the same Trojanized body, but this time, this one was attributed to the Moonstone Sleet. Do you remember this Child of Lazarus guy? Yeah, that's it. Okay, this one was also reported by Microsoft, I guess early August 2023. And so Microsoft noticed, some suspicious activity as well, delivering, malicious, Trojanized putties, sent in. This time it's not an ISO image. It's like, I guess an archive, a .zip archive. It's like, the same, file system kind of file format so that you can combine multiple files together, like the Trojanized installer, as well as the README file. So the README file is like the key here. It's the one that only kicks in the infection. If you didn't put in the right password or the right IP address, it doesn't kick in. And we'll talk about, why they're even doing this. Okay. Again, same targets, individuals and organizations, the software and IT, education, defense, industrial. So pretty much the same targets. So the same way, the threat actors will contact the victims over LinkedIn, developer freelancing platforms, presenting themselves, hey, are you interested in this offer? And, they probably switch communication over to WhatsApp or any other, maybe encrypted social media platform where they can share in the Trojanized software, which will kick in the infection chain. Okay. Now you see in this screenshot here from IDA that it's pretty much similar to what we've seen before. But now it's actually checking for a password. And I've added like these comments for myself. I hope you can just, kind of get a sense of what's going on from these. It's just checking for this password. And as soon as it matches, then it proceeds with execution. In our case, it's just, decrypting, making space, memory for, large buffer for the next stage to be, loaded in memory. It's HC256 decrypting. I'll talk about HC56 in just a minute. It's HC256 decrypting the payload. You probably didn't notice this, but in the previous attack case, the payload was not encrypted. It was stored in plain text. So this is something probably new. So they're building their defenses. They're building their stuff. Okay. Then they're just unzip, decompressing the buffer, and mapping it to memory. As you can probably see, this is from Hue. Anybody here using Hue? Yeah, definitely. It's a Russian thing, okay? It's like the blue screen of death of every Russian analyst. Okay. Okay, now this is the execution flow. You can probably see this is a little bit more involved than the previous one. So they're getting better. Okay, same legitimate software, but now this time, this is decrypting, HC256 decrypting, the next stage, and loading it into memory, reflective loading. Okay, then this will definitely load and execute in memory, what we call split loader. And, it's quite obvious from the name why this is called split loader. You can see it's got two components to it. The first component is just an in-memory malicious DLL. The second one is just, what you might call a configuration file that stores the next stage as well as some other stuff. Okay, that user group.dat will just read the compressed next stage from some cache 512.db, which is the Compacker downloader, a well-known Lazarus downloader has been seen in so many attacks before. And that one will just reach out to the C2 server and download the final stage, which will also run in memory. So, almost everything runs in memory except for this some cache 512. This will be written to disk, but it's encrypted, so probably will not be flagged. Okay, HC256. Anybody has ever heard of HC256? Yeah, anyway, it's a stream cipher. It's not commonly seen in malware. You've probably seen RC4, AES, and many other ciphers like XOR encryption. These are so much common, and they have less entropy. HC56 is quite not a thing in malware. However, I've seen it seen used so many times consistently in attacks that were attributed to the Moonstone Sleet. The key definitely changes across multiple, stages and different samples. And the core is, it just uses a 256-bit key, 256-bit nonce, or you can call it initialization vector. So that's it. Reflective loading. So remember, we said it just decrypts the payload and maps the memory. Reflective loading is a thing that you'll see common in most of the Lazarus malware. They just allocate size of image, page read-write memory, either at the original entry point or the system's preferred address. And so they just virtual alloc and allocate that much memory for the next stage. They then just commit that memory and copy the payload, the section headers, and the sections. And in case the memory was not allocated at the expected image page address, it will just apply relocation fix-ups to make sure that these hard-coded addresses, doesn't break up the execution. And it calls the DLL main past this special DLL checksum. And we'll say what's the DLL checksum. It plays a great role here in execution to prevent automated analysis. Okay, split loader. Anybody has ever heard of split loader? Yeah, it's just a custom loader, I guess. Anyway, it's an in-memory DLL. I mean, most of these stages are just DLLs. Lazarus loves DLLs anyway. It functions only in memory. It's just an installer module. Yeah. It tries and loads the next stage, split loader itself. And you can see user group.dat, it just runs only in memory as well. And the next, stage or component is just the sum cache DB. You can see it's just encrypted, definitely. And it contains the next stage's comebacker. So it set up persistence by creating, schedule task, using iTask scheduler, or, just, the usual run registry key persistent stuff. And it executes the in-memory, first component user group.dat, which will read, the next stage comebacker DLL from the sum cache DB 512 and just load it into memory as well. So you've probably noticed from the previous screenshot, this long command line string, it's like load DLL and this, long pass the sum cache 512 DB file. This is the configuration file I told you about. And you can see, these, DJWY 4701, and these arguments will be parsed and extracted by user group.dat, the in-memory DLL. And it turns out that the first pass is just the pass of the next stage, the next stage configuration file. And the first 4 bytes of the XOR key, which will be used to decrypt the encrypted comebacker. So comebacker is stored in this sum cache 512 dB. This is just config file that combines, the next stage and some other, information, like the part of the next 4 bytes of the XOR key and the size of a payload and some other stuff. And so it reads the encrypted comebacker from the configuration file. It's also checking for the magic. You can see here, this check here for the magic, okay? Checking for 9530, and it's also like skipping the first 4 bytes. These are like never used. The next 4 bytes are just the size of comebacker, the encrypted comebacker, which is XOR encrypted. This time they're not using HC256. And just the magic number, okay? And near the end, we have like this reading of hex 1C bytes. And turns out these hex 1C bytes are not all used. There's only like the first 4 bytes used here. And there is part of an XOR key, okay? The XOR key is 8 bytes. The first 4 bytes come from the long command line string, and the next 4 just come from this config file. Okay, you can see here, this is the XOR key. It's 8 bytes. The first 4 bytes come from the long command line string, and the next 4 just come from that config file. You can see that's just, the decryption loop. It's decompressing after decryption and just reflective loading that into memory. So same thing, just decrypting, decompressing, loading into memory. And comebacker. Comebacker is probably a downloader that was seen in many Lazarus attacks. It's not like something that, it's not something that's new to us, I guess. And it has gone through a few changes, but the core functionalities remain the same. Just contact the C2 server and download some backdoor, full-feature backdoor, which runs only in memory as well. And the way it authenticates to the C2 server, it actually uses, these 4 bytes. Remember? Yes, I guess. Yeah, the 4701, these 4 bytes, along with, some randomly generated bytes. These are all used to authenticate to the C2 server. And so if you just lost somewhere in the middle of the chain, you'll probably not be able to get the final payload. And so this is a major characteristic of Moonstone Sleet, the obscure, their payloads, by having this multi-stage setup. Operation 9 is shape-shifting threat. Okay, this is something that I identified March 2025. It was just the North Korean actors behind a well-documented contiguous interview campaign, same threat actors, and probably the same target. Their main target remains unchanged, just compromising developer systems. They were mass distributing malicious packages, remember? Said all these different infection vectors. One of them was malicious packages. So Operation 9 exploits the dynamic and growing trust within the developer communities. Most of us, using open source software, don't even pause or check in, what's in there, okay? So this might be a compromised package. Anyway, it's a multi-stage modular malware, that runs almost on all systems, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever. Okay, let's talk about the malware here. We said it's a modular. What that means is we know that Lazarus loves multi-stage setup. One stage delivers the next, which will deliver the next, etc. The attack features a multi-stage malware with modular components. These are the main 3 components, as you can see. It's main 9_905. And, you probably wonder, what's in common in these. It's the 9 is just the campaign ID, and the 905 is probably the targeting group. Like I said, they're mainly going after software developers, distributing just malicious packages. And like I said, works across different platforms. And one notable thing is that the C2 endpoints were hosted by Router Hosting LLC. So this is a little bit about the Lazarus infrastructure. They either use hack web servers or vulnerable ones and operate these as their command and control servers, or just pay using Paycoin to get some C2 servers to operate their campaigns. Okay. The infection chain starts with the malicious npm package, and that one contains the obfuscated pivot tail. We'll talk about this later. That one will just pull and fetch the next stage invisible field loader. This one is also obfuscated. And that one can then just download additional and more components from /payload campaign ID group ID. That's just the same 905 thing I just mentioned. That's just the main component. You kind of think of that as a full-fledged backdoor. And the other component is just a browser steerer component. I know it. Okay, pivot tail. So pivot tail is just mass distributed through malicious npm packages, and it's really obfuscated. It utilizes a variety of different obfuscations, variable renaming, CFF, self-invoking functions, deck code injection. So it can be really hard if you're just like making your way through it yourself. Hopefully we have some, automatic online deobfuscators for this. And you can probably see here that it's mainly targeting these browser extensions, which mainly have to do with crypto wallets. So, like I said, those are the crypto guys. And you can see down here, it's requesting the download of this next stage, which is the obfuscated invisible ferret. So it's just doing some stealer stuff before it finally downloads the next stage, which is the invisible ferret loader. Okay, that's the obfuscated invisible ferret loader. It's just a modular downloader that will download additional modules from the C2 server. And it exists, in multiple versions, but mostly it's just, just the same thing, downloading of additional components. And the cool thing is they have obfuscated that under the layers of 65, compressed reverse order base 64 string. And hopefully you can script it like this to deobfuscate it. And now it looks more readable, probably. You can see that you have just this, private IP address, probably left there for debugging, I guess. And you've got two main functions. One that downloads the major main component, which, like I said, probably just a full-fledged backdoor. And the next one is just a stealer component. Related attacks. So I promised only 3 attacks, but I couldn't stand it. This one can also be interesting. This one is a trojanized IP message. So everything's trojanized here. But this one was discovered by 360 Threat Intelligence Center in December 2024. So not far from now. That one also is just a trojanized installer app that will release the, when it executes on the victim, it releases the official actual IP message installer and runs in memory another malicious payload, which will kick off the rest of the infection chain. Okay, you can see here, this is the trojanized installer. It drops and executes installer.exe to app data, which is the decoy, actual IP message installer, just, to get your attention. While in memory, it's actually XOR decrypting and running loader1.dll, which is the next stage, which will load loader2.dll, which also runs in memory, which will XOR decrypt and load the comebacker guy. Finally, downloads the backdoor, which does all the kind of fancy stuff, reaches out to the C2 server, get commands for what to do next. Okay, this is the trojanized installer, and you can probably see from here it's just XOR decryption stuff. It's XOR decrypting the next stage, looking for this win.org bin w. This is just an exported function from the next stage malicious DLL, and just calling this one here. And that's loader1.dll. You can probably see here, this one is going to drop the installer.exe, that decoy IP message installer, but it's also reflective loading the next stage in memory, which obviously here, it's just calling this get as printf y character, just another exported function. And loader2.dll. You can probably see here also from this screenshot here that, it's just XOR decrypting the next stage DLL, which is comebacker again. And it's just, this is 16 iterations loop, decrypting 16 bytes at a time, just XOR decryption loop. The final stage is, this is loader2.dll. You can see it's looking for get Windows sized Y character. This is just an export from the comebacker DLL. This one is just like, this is the one that's going to kick off the rest of the stuff. And this 4-byte string here turns out to be more like a key. It's actually checking for this at the start of the get window sized y character function. And if you didn't pass in the key, then it doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do. And it's doing this to prevent it from automated analysis when you submit something like a DLL to a sandbox and you expect it to give you what you want. But in fact, if you didn't provide in that key, it's not going to run. OK, we're making it to the end. So the same body. But this one is like the 2022 incident, and that's just the 2023. You can probably see they've gone better. They're building their skills, their payloads. This definitely, there's the fact that they're using the same initial infection vector, suggests some internal knowledge sharing. So they do share knowledge. And also different infection chain. You've seen probably the second one is more involved, multi-stage setup, and probably more complications, which suggest, a different operating group or probably changing TTBs. Sure you know what TTBs is? Tactics, techniques, and procedures, OK? We can see additional stages have already been added, which indicates the involvement of another acting group or maybe, like I said, just change of TTBs. So we can see from this screenshot here, the right corner here, this is just the plain Z, next stage stored in the first button installer. They're just storing this in plain text, so prob and AV scanning this will be able to catch it. However, in the one attributed to the Moonstone Sleet, it was HC256 encrypted and compressed. So they add a little bit of obfuscation to it. And we can also probably see the consistent usage of DLL reflective loading. It seems like a thing across their payloads. And, this is something that we've seen so many times in Compacker and many other Lazarus payloads. They like reflective loading and running things in memory. And we've seen the usage of run DLL 32 and this long command line string, which includes the pass, the next stage, part of the key, and the checksum, which will be used for authenticating to the C2 server. And this is also something that we've seen in so many Lazarus attacks. This is why we can assess with high confidence that these are Lazarus things, right? Because we've seen that so many times before in many Lazarus campaigns. And the consistent check of that DLL checksum, that key I told you about, which is passed from one stage to the other, just to make sure this doesn't run as expected in an automated analysis environment. This is something that we've seen also in another malware cluster called Stritnettle. It's something from the old times, but the same thing still roaming around. The same cipher, HC256, was used in other attacks attributed to Lazarus as well to obscure their payload. Seems like, this is the only ABT I've seen using HC56, which is interesting. Also, February 28, 2024, the JB CERT released a plug titled New Malicious PyPy Packages by Lazarus, and the analysis revealed the following. The payloads were also obfuscated using HC256 encrypted, same run DLL usage to execute the next stages, and same uses of malicious packages to compromise their victims. I guess that's it for today, and you can definitely reach me out on any of these contacts. You can find my research plug, my Twitter, my LinkedIn. Feel free to reach me out if you got any questions, any inquiries. Anybody has any questions? Thank you so much. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the performance. It was very interesting and nice.
Thank you so much.
In what way do this group weaponize the open source software? They patched or they make a site?
Yeah, definitely. Usually when you visit, like, say, Bati web page and you download it from their official web page, they share like a SHA-256 MD5 hash along with the executable. And this is just to check the integrity of the executable. And so you can probably just download it, check the hash, and if it matches, then it's probably the official one. Otherwise, it's probably fishy and can be just one of these hacky Trojanized things.
And do I understand you right? And they make a collision of the hash? Of the
Yeah, if you get hash collision, then definitely this is not the official one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Could you please explain some points about PuTTY cases? Was this backdoored binaries just join it with a payload, or it can maybe intercept some useful calls, encryption, decryption, catch some keys from SSH servers, or it was just
well, this backdoor is just, like any fully fledged backdoor, it's full functional, can do many things. It can contact C2 servers, download additional modules. It can execute commands on your system, harvest files, exfiltrate them, steal cookies, steal passwords, everything. So they usually have multiple, I would say, iterations of development they go through, and they're fully functional.
No, I mean, maybe threat actors modified some functionality of regular PuTTY and add some additional functions at these binaries, such as intercepting encryption keys or giving them the SSH access to the servers.
Modified what exactly? I'm not sure.
I mean, was it just joined with payload, or they get the original binaries and changes its functionality?
Well, I guess it's just, a malicious stage that runs in memory after all these stages come through. I'm not sure if I get your question. No, it doesn't really modify anything. It just, features all these, stealing functionalities, key logins things, stuff like this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much.
Thank you.
A couple of questions. Is there any progress in Windows in terms of preventing the DLL hijacking, because it's been so common for the past 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you usually don't see in Lazarus, but they're using it. This is something even more common among China attributed nation-state groups. But actually, I don't think Windows has anything to do about it. It's just like they've copied the actual executable, which is legitimate, this color CBL, into like a folder that they created and dropped the malicious DLL into the same folder. And by default, Windows will just search maybe this registry key for paths of the most common system DLLs and the other DLLs that this program depends on. And if it can't find it, it goes and searches elsewhere. So it searches like this in a hierarchical order. And if it can't find it, probably it's going to search the same directory. And it finds it, then it loads it into memory. So unfortunately, I don't think Windows has done anything about this. It's still commonly abused even until now.
Right. Is there any point in using PuTTY client in this time, given that Windows has been supporting SSH implementation
I think,
for a while?
like I said before, it's safe to use PuTTY as long as you're not going to put in the same password or IP address they provided in a README file along with the trojanized installer. It's going to be okay because this one is the one actually triggering the malicious payload. And so you just want to make sure that you're not running or executing, a fishy trojanized thing. You might check the hash, maybe. Maybe just make sure you're taking this from their official web page and not just using something that someone has sent over in an email, something like that, because, who knows?
Right, and last one, do you have any advice for setting up NGFW rules or other monitoring rules to detect malware like this?
Well, I'm not much into detection engineering, but I would say EDR solutions and many other security options or solutions are doing a great job in this. They have modules that scan memory and scan the modules for any things that maybe run in a private committed memory that start with an MZ that's like something fishy for them, and they would flag it as malware. And in terms of rules, they do have pretty good rules for detecting this. I think, there is Nexitron Systems source scanner. This got a lot of ER rules which can scan for different kinds of malware, different families, APT. So they're quite good at this. Also, you have many EDR options that can definitely add to this. They do have modules, operate at the kernel level. Malware doesn't usually, have kernel access, so they're kind of like one level above them, so they can have better visibility over what's going on. So probably using commercial EDR or maybe some like source scanner will be good for detecting such stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.